They're losing control of the gold market. They're losing control of the silver. They've lost control of the silver market. They've lost control of the gold market. Now the big question is, are they going to? The definition of money is changing. It is becoming digitized, or it's becoming tokenized. I know that sounds to Bitcoiners. That sounds like, oh my God, those are just shit coins. I'm like, well, and news for you. I understand also that you guys feel that U.S. dollars are shit coins. And to be honest with you, I don't even disagree with the sentiment. It is a perpetual war. You're always fighting this impulse for people to want to rule over other people. If you read the Constitution carefully, folks, if you think Trump's a dictator now, you ain't seen what the president can actually do. Now he knows. And he's executing like he knows. Are we going to stand up like men and say we want to live free, or are we going to...
How many Americans do you think are aware of any of this?
What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Tom Luongo is the publisher of Gold, Goats, and Guns, where he speaks truth and destroys narratives about politics, markets, and cultures. Tom, welcome back to the Bitcoin Matrix for the 5th time. How are you?
I'm good, Cedric. How are you? Wow, it has been 5 times, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the 5th go around. So I'm excited to chat with you.
Mm-hmm.
Things are fine, but I will admit I think I'm a little black-pilled.
Really? I would.
Yeah, and
Never.
So and we've seen each other a few times, but I haven't gotten to really speak with you directly. So I'm hoping to kind of maybe get the Tom Luongo thesis as of right now.
Oh, Jesus.
I could prompt you with a couple of subjects, but
no, it's fine. To remind everybody, so Cedric's talking about, we do dinner down in Tampa every once in a while. He, myself, a couple other people, Paul Tarantino, right, from Bite Federal. And and a few others, right? And then the last time we had a great opportunity to sit down and have a long dinner with Martin Armstrong, which was a lot of fun as well. So and in those talks, I think the last time we went to dinner, I think you were at the far end of the table the last time we went, and it's a crowd of 13, and then this time it was, Marty was the center of attention. So no, so what's going on now is that it's if you don't hang with the basic argument, and if you don't buy the basic argument that I'm about to make, then you might as well shut the podcast off, because you and I are not going to have anything to talk about. Because simply put, you have to accept the fact that the game that Trump is actually playing, and is much different than the game everybody thinks he's playing. I think the best way I've described it recently is that we all exist. We all kind of every day we get up and we interface the great game of geopolitics and markets and all of this, and who runs the world and all of that. And we see it at the ground level. We see it at the middle management level, right? We see it at the Hillary Clinton level, at the Jim Comey level, at the at the not even the George Soros level, because I think Soros is at best upper management. Guys like Larry Fink and BlackRock are also upper management. They're not really the actual game. So what you have is at least 3 strata, right, of things going on here. You have, the lieutenants who are doing stuff on a day-to-day basis out in the world. You then have the upper management who run all the big corporations and supposedly the countries, but there's really not all that much difference between the countries and and the particular countries and the corporations that we're talking about here. The BlackRocks, the Microsofts, the Bill Gates foundations, the Ford foundations, the European Union, whatnot. And then you have the strata above that. Then you have the people who nominally I would put under that rubric of Davos, but it's much more pointed than that. The older I get, the more I do this, the more I realize that, what I used to call Davos is, still just upper management. And now it's a much more rarefied game. And it's the King of England. It's the old banking cartels of Europe. It's the people, as I like to put it, the real bankers and the real movers and shakers of the world don't have Wikipedia pages. They have banking relationships with banks you've never heard of, right? I mean, I hate to like be blunt about this, but the whole concept of the high table and the unseen world in John Wick is probably closer to the truth than we would all like to be comfortable with. And we find it almost kind of comforting that we could have this game that Keanu Reeves and company play with lots of guns and everything else in the John Wick movies. But the reality is that the high table really is what we're talking about here. It's this unseen layer of organized crime, assassins, drug traffickers, human traffickers. They traffic in little girls and porn and all of this stuff, drugs, all of it around the world. And that's their cash flow. And that's the cash flow of the crap that we see every day when we see a bunch of, kids in black bloc running around the streets of Chicago and Portland, attacking ICE agents and the local police departments turning a blind eye to it, right? And then we get angry about it. And then we say, well, look, see, Donald Trump doesn't have this shit under control. Well, the reason that they're doing shit like that now is because he is fighting them at that level. That's why he's blowing boats out of the water off the coast of Venezuela. It's why he's deporting Trinidad. It's why they're fighting him and saying, well, these are real people. They've been here for 15 years. Yes, so what? They've been here for 15 years, running drugs and kids and everything else. And like, I'm sorry, but that's the reality. So then when you look at the counter moves that have been happening, every time Trump puts pressure on them in one arena, they fight back in another arena. And so what we're dealing with literally right now, Cedric, and I talked about this morning for my patrons on the Sunday Market Report, that the Civil War's on. It's actually been going on for a while, but the Civil War in the United States is happening as we speak. Everything you're seeing out of the Democrats with the shutdown, with the way they're going about the shutdown, it's all tied absolutely directly to trying to stop Trump from recapitalizing the middle class through the plan of action that he has, that he's clearly trying to implement, which is to lower regulations, deport all the illegals, change the immigration system, cut the regulations in half, try and get taxes lowered, fire a whole bunch of federal staff, get rid of the managerial state, and all of that. And that all cuts at various levels of and attacks all of their funding. So when you think about how you beat a big unseen enemy like that, you don't send Keanu Reeves in with an unlimited supply of ammunition, right? That's a metaphor, right? The unstoppable killing machine of John Wick really is a man of supreme will. And I'm not talking Donald Trump as John Wick here. I'm just saying that John Wick exists as an idea that we're going to have infinite will to do what's necessary to take these people down, no matter how much it costs us, no matter how much violence is going to be applied against us. That's where we are. So we watch Trump, and what's he doing? He's attacking their funding at three very, very important levels. The first level was USAID and the NGOs. It was the money, it was the public money that he had direct access to as the Article 2 executive of the United States. The second layer is the more dangerous layer. That's the one they're fighting him on now, which is the cartels, the organized crime, the private money and all of the government related money laundering that goes on. Remember, the organized crime layer that upper management or the unseen layer interacts with. They interact with the various organized crime families and organizations around the world. They're interfaced directly with all the IC, intelligence communities of all the major countries in the world. So that link has to be broken, and that money has to dry up, and you have to attack that process. So it's a two-pronged assault, right? First, it's DNI Gabbard going after various people within the intelligence community, outing them, firing them when necessary or whatever. And then the other side of it is, of course, sending Tom Homan in with ICE and, arresting them all and then watching the response. So now, once you view this as a big friggin' gang war, as a turf war of epic proportions, then you realize that this is a war, and that engenders anxiety and in the normal people because they see it as just chaos. but it's not chaos. It's war. Okay. And war is fought strategically. And that means you're seeing a variety of different actions being taken of varying different types. If I just saw chaos, Cedric, I wouldn't come up here and try and blow literal smoke up your ass and say it wasn't that. If I didn't actually see what I thought, like if I had a plan to take these people out.
When it comes to Bitcoin, the rules are simple. Run your own node, hold your own keys, and protect your seed phrase. That's where MicroSeed comes in. Unlike bulky backups, MicroSeed is stamped onto a tiny steel washer. Fireproof, waterproof, and so small you can carry it anywhere or hide it in plain sight. Go to microseed.io and use the code MATRIX for a discount on your order.
It would look a lot like what Donald Trump is doing. I never really had a plan. I just I had like a vague idea in my head. But the more I started watching it play itself out, I'm like, oh, that's what he was doing. The more I talk to people who have military backgrounds and whatnot, who understand this type of action, this kind of theory of action. And I see one part of it in the financial markets. They see another part of it, in the information warfare space or whatever. We all come to the same conclusion. This is what's going on. And Trump has taken on a massive war. It's a multi-front war because it has to be a multi-front war. Because if he doesn't take on all fronts at the same time, then he gets outmaneuvered, which is what happened to him in this first term, right? But he didn't have the infrastructure. He didn't have the personnel. He didn't have the backing of the people. He didn't have a strong enough Russia. He didn't have a strong enough China, relatively speaking, or committed Russia and China to then actually have his flanks on a variety of, because they're all fighting the same war. So now you have the three biggest powers in the world fighting the entrenched, centuries old power that has attacked all of them over the course of centuries. How many times have the British gone to war by proxy with the Russians? How many times have we watched them try to destroy China as a civilization? Same thing and how many times have they gone in and tried to destroy the United States? Like I've said it before, and I'll say it I'll keep saying it until people finally get it. Everybody gets it. The British are still butthurt about Cornwallis having to surrender at Yorktown back in 1781. And they're still trying to figure out how to win the war. And so, when I had that first insight, I didn't really understand what it meant. It's been 4 years. I'm like, that's the insight. Okay, now, dude, you got to come up with receipts. You have to spend time filling that in and making that not look like you're just a crazy person spouting off the top of your head, which at the time, maybe 4 years ago, I was. Like, I saw some things and I went, this feels like the British being the British. But now I spend a lot of time talking about this stuff, and I uncover all these fellow travelers who have been doing all the work over all these years. I got my friends Alex Craner, I got Matt Arrett, I've got the women over at Promethean Action, I've got my own work, I've got Richard Poe, I've got all these people in the back in this corner of the internet conversation, and they're all saying, oh, by the way, did you know this? Did you know that? So at the end of the day, let's think about this. What was the War of 1812 fought over? It was basically a first attempt to try and destroy the United States. What was the Civil War? Like, the Civil War was the first attempted color revolution in the United States by the British. They radicalized the abolitionists in the Northeast. They created a complete, shit show between North and South over slavery. And then, they fomented both sides, shook the ant jar, and then watched us kill each other. Now, guess what? We're watching the same kind of thing play itself out between Russia and Ukraine. Right? It's the same. The mechanisms are exactly the same, and they successfully pulled this off between the various factions within Tsarist Russia leading up to the fall and the fall of the Tsars and the end of World War One. And literally, if you go through World War One and you think of it from that perspective, World War One was fought to destroy both the Russian Empire and the Ottoman Empire, and it was very successful. And it also subsumed the Americans into the British system of debt, central banking, and everything, and the first real attempt to break down the very robust separation of powers that we had in the United States by giving us both the income tax and direct election of senators, all in 1913. I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but you know, what I'm getting at is that I never really, before December of last year, I never really thought Donald Trump understood all of this. I thought, well, maybe he understands a little bit of it. And then he sends Elon Musk over to, to the UK and sends him after Keir Starmer over very specific issues. And I'm like, nah, really? Okay. Then I started reviewing like, Trump 1.0 and his relationship with the Queen and this and that and how hard they fought him on, going to visit with the Queen and all of this stuff. And I'm like, oh, it's so very freaking obvious that Trump has always understood what the problem was. He was just completely cockblocked from doing anything about it. So where are we right now? We're in the middle of the war, dude. And you're either going to get on board and fight it, or you're going to sit back and go, I'm scared. And I'm watching all my libertarian brethren, or formerly libertarian brethren, melt down and, act like, chuckle and collapsitarian and point fingers and scream that Trump is an authoritarian. I'm like, yeah, so was Lincoln. And guess what? Lincoln was right. I didn't feel that way 5 years ago. I do today. Why? Because the Constitution is something precious. Because sometimes you have to realize that the fight you're trying to win isn't the one that's right in front of you, the one that you're staring at, and what your principles tell you is correct. That those principles are being used against you. Your humanity is being used against you. Your desire to live free and be left alone is actually being used against you. Is actually working against you because it's keeping you from self-organizing around a much more organized and ruthless opponent. So at some point, you have to just realize it's a war, and during war, there are no principles. There are no freaking libertarians in foxholes any more than there are atheists. There aren't. Like, war is not the time for that. We fight the war so that we have the chance to act like libertarians later on and let peace reign. But sometimes you got to go to war in order to defend your home. One of the things I said this morning in the market report when I was railing about this, again, trying to make this point, because I know I know my audience skews that way. Is this. Do you think you have property rights? No, of course you don't have property rights. You pay property tax. You owe the government in perpetuity. You're a feudal slave on your land, paying 1% to 4% in rent. So I got news for you. You wake up in the morning, you're being aggressed. The non-aggression principle doesn't apply. Period. Under any circumstances, like every day, the whole rubric of your life is you are being aggressed well beyond what your principles would allow if you're a hardcore libertarian. Therefore, you have every right to meet force with force. Or you're a pacifist, in which case you're not in the conversation because you're a pacifist. Okay. So once you're there, you understand that, okay, now how am I going to actually fight this force that has got me as a feudal slave? Now it gets interesting. Now you have to talk to all your brethren around you. Now you have to go talk to your community members. Well, who are those community members? Well, that's your city council, and that's your state government, and that's your federal government. Again, as I've been arguing, and I mean that in the classical sense, not in the contrarian sense, right? What I've been arguing for the last 4 years is about, my stance on Powell with central bank and SOFR and raising interest rates and everything else. What I've been arguing is that the central bank may be evil, but it's like everything else in conception relative to your principles. But what it really is in reality is a tool. And in the financial space, it can be a tool for good or it can be a tool for evil, depending on how you define good and evil. In this case, I'm going to define good as defending the sacred honor of the U.S. Constitution. Why? Because the U.S. Constitution is a miracle. It is the only founding document of any stripe on the planet that puts the people above the government, in theory, right? Now, of course, it doesn't operate that way today, but that doesn't mean that the idea of the Constitution should be just thrown out because it failed. We should want the Constitution to be reinstated. And why would we have the old kings of Europe be so dead set on destroying the Constitution? Well, there's two reasons. One, obviously, the Constitution empowers the people to be able to say, you know what? Sorry, fuck globalism. And fuck them. The second thing is more philosophical. It's not practical. It's philosophical. It's philosophically, they're saying to you, have quote unquote the divine right of kings or whatever you want to call it. They have the right to rule because they are superior beings, and you have to be their chattel slaves. Well, if you look at parliamentary systems, you look at all the other charters of every other freaking country on the planet, it doesn't say we the people are trying to ordain this constitution to create these limited powers of our federal government. That's like waving a red flag at a bull. Okay, philosophically it's diametrically opposed to who these people are. They believe they have the right to rule you. America says no one has the right to rule anybody, and we're going to create a government that is limited in scope in order to enforce and help protect the rights of the people. Now, we can argue philosophically whether that arrangement is even good or not, but that doesn't matter. Fundamentally, that's far fucking better than everything that they have. And if we destroy the and if we allow them to destroy the Constitution, we allow them to destroy the United States, then it's going to validate, and that's the goal here, to demoralize you and invalidate the very concept of self-rule. At a philosophical level, they will have proven that all of this individualism is a bunch of crap, and that they win, and that might makes right. Right? That's philosophically the way they think. That's philosophically the way they've structured the argument. That's fundamentally what the war we're fighting. And so, while we can have great highfalutin arguments about decentralization versus centralization and this, that, and everything else, none of that matters right now. Because right now, this is it for all the fucking marbles. Are we going to stand up like men and say we want to live free, or are we going to argue amongst ourselves about the placements of commas versus semicolons, and whether or not, whether or not, for example, the Fannie and Freddie IPO is, libertarian enough or not? Like, fuck you. Like, this is the whole thing. Like, we're here to discuss whether or not what the order of operations is to get to the place where we can have the highfalutin arguments about the limits of individualism. Okay? And if you want to understand why I've come to this conclusion, Cedric, it's because I've watched the individualist left, otherwise known as the Marxists. They believe in they believe in the pure and utter individuation, right? 75 fucking genders, LGBTQ, ITA plus the BBQ sauce. Like, it's all identitarian politics is at its core, ultimately wants to break everything down to the same things hardcore libertarians do. The individual is sovereign. It's why the political circle, the political spectrum is on a line to the circle. And therefore, hardcore Marxists and hardcore libertarians practically are exactly the same. And they purity spiral in exactly the same way, because of the way our brains work physically. So now, with that said, we're watching how individualism is being used to drive people crazy through this mind virus of the unquenchable envy of Marxism. It's no different than the unquenchable oppositional defiance disorder of hardcore libertarians. It's no different. I know this. I used to be one. And so you step back and you look at it and you go, they're both being empowered now. One to stay out of the game, and the other one to be the friggin' literal brown shirts, or in this case, black shirts, to undermine the entire scenario. So that the hardcore libertarians sit there and do nothing but complain about Trump doing everything wrong. Meanwhile, Antifa's running around like friggin', like crazed jackals, trying to create another Fort Sumter. Like, it's all just bullshit. At the end of the day, Trump has been elected to rule and to run the country, and that means all enemies, foreign and domestic. like it or not. That means bait them into making bad decisions and then roll them all up in flour, go for the wet spot and put them all in fucking jail. And if they resist, shoot them. He has that power as president. He's always had it. And so that's where we have to be in our, I hate to say it, but that's where we have to be in our thinking.
What is this a war, a perpetual war, or is this like a war that's going to kind of come to an end by the end of Trump's term?
It is a perpetual war. You're always fighting this impulse for people to want to rule over other people. That is the way it is always going to be. It's a perpetual war in that respect, which is part of the reason why Marxism doesn't really work, and neither does libertarianism, because there's 1 to 5% of the population that are both sociopaths and psychopaths. The question, of course, we should be having is, or the discussion we should be having is, what systems do we put in place that minimize the effect of psychopaths and sociopaths on our society? We have chosen the path of maximalization, right? We have nothing but psychopaths and sociopaths ruling us right now and saying that they're justified. So I'm all for tearing the old system down. Don't get me wrong. But the war we're fighting, this particular phase of this war, of the eternal war, the acute nature of this war, which right now is literally World War III being fought in multiple venues at the same and at different levels in the same areas of financial, geopolitical, cultural, military, militarily and whatnot. No, that's going to have a very definite end. I don't know when that end is going to be. My guess, 3 to 5 years. These things tend to burn themselves out in terms of extreme levels of violence in about that amount of time. World War II was 5 years long, 6 years long. The Civil War was 5 years long, yada, yada, yada. Like, the intense nature of these things is going to be about five years or so. I think we're in year 1 of that phase of the kinetic phase of this war. So Trump's got a lot of work to do.
So, it sounds like there's a lot of fronts here to this. And let's talk maybe more about financial, particularly like money, interest rates. Right. I mean, money changed a lot at the end of World War II.
And not for the better.
For the better, no. So, is money changing now, or is that more going to happen later?
It's in the process of changing right now, and you can see it. So it's funny. I love Bitcoin. I love gold. I love decentralization of systems. So I'm watching everything that's occurring around this. So let's back up for a second. So yes, the short answer to your question is yes. The Europeans are desperate to go to a digital euro. They all don't. At the same time, they know that doing so will create a large amount of capital flight out of the European space, right? The European capital space. So now they're working very, very hard. And that they're desperate to try and keep the capital that exists within Europe there. So they're putting up capital controls left and right. Thing I saw this morning that really got me interested. Somebody threw it at me on Twitter this morning that the Bank of England, for example, Andrew Bailey over at the Bank of England wants to limit the amount of holding, the amount that any British citizen can hold in US dollar stablecoins to $10,000. Because they know what's coming. They know that when the Clarity Act finally gets passed, the Genius Act's been passed, but the Clarity Act has not. And that ties into the shutdown, I believe. When you realize that once that framework is in place and the United States can literally issue greenbacks around the Federal Reserve through the Treasury directly in the form of US dollar stablecoins and empower the local and regional banks through that kind of mechanism, that means that we could have offshore dollar holders in US dollar stablecoins as and there's going to be international ones like Tether. There's going to be domestic ones. Think your local bank. I don't care if it's Truist or Wells Fargo or whomever. They're all going to issue their own stable coins based on their own book portfolio, right? So Bailey's desperate to keep everybody from leaving the pound once they once they finally close the door. So once they, in Jerome Powell's words, close the fucking door, right? So, yeah, the definition of money is changing. It is becoming digitized, or it's becoming tokenized in a way that isn't just digitized as a ledger entry at the Federal Reserve or the Bank of England or the SNB or the Bundesbank or the BOJ. I'm leaving out the ECB because I don't think they're going to survive. My personal opinion. And then the BIS and all the rest of that stuff. So when you really stop to think about what we're dealing with here, we're dealing with the possibility of tokenization of assets, hard assets that will be backed by treasury notes. And what is Trump's, and I know that sounds to Bitcoiners, that sounds like, oh my God, those are just shit coins. I'm like, well, and news for you. I understand also that you guys feel that it's that US dollars are shit coins. And to be honest with you, I don't even disagree with the sentiment. But what's important is to realize that everything that Trump is doing in DC is to lessen the amount of, or lessen the percentage shit in the shit coin that is the dollar, backed by US treasuries. What I mean by that is we're going to see a lot less debt being issued. This shutdown may wind up balancing the budget. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to all of this. And so I'm going to try and lay some of it out here. But the shutdown is very, very interesting because it doesn't work politically for the Democrats at all. They're going to get roasted for this. They're not going to win this fight. They're the ones that shut down the government over giving free health care to illegals. So why are they doing it? Is it because AOC is running for president or for Chuck Schumer's seat and he's all worried about? No, that's all bullshit. None of that matters. This is a directive from upper management. This is a directive from Davos, the high table, whatever you want to call them. Why? What's the big deal? What are they trying to stop? Well, I would argue the two things they're trying to stop are, at a minimum, and there's probably other things that Trump is trying to get done that I haven't thought of or addressed yet, and I'm sure will come out as we watch this shutdown evolve. The first thing I thought of was the relisting and the IPO of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I'll get to why that's so important in just a minute. The second thing is what I just touched on, the passage of the Clarity Act, which is stopping the process of creating the US dollar stablecoin system that Scott Bessent so desperately wants. But at the same time, so that's what they're trying to stop. What are they empowering, though, on the other side? Right? The shutdown is X. It means X. It happens. It has bad effects that they want, and it has good effects, or the other way around, depending on your point of view. So the weapon, the shutdown, is being used for these things on this side of the ledger, Fannie and Freddie, stop the Clarity Act. I'm sure there's 4 or 5 other things they want to create. On the other side, what's good? Well, it gives Russ Vought the opportunity at OMD, and I know I mentioned how important he was to you previously, to go through and finally implement the $1.3 to $1.5 trillion in cuts that he identified before Trump ever even took office. He's already, I'm telling you, Vought knows at OMB, and he has his group out over at OMB. They already know what they want to cut. They've known for 3 years what they wanted to cut if they ever got back into power. So that's why Trump let it be known that he's now all of a sudden the guy everybody should be afraid of. But they held Vought in the background, and nobody even knew his name. I knew it was coming, right? Because I knew where the cuts had been identified, who would actually then have, and then what would be the conditions to create the opportunity for those cuts to be implemented. Well, the shutdown. One of the things that Peter St. Onge brought up the other day on the first day of the shutdown on October 1st is that it takes, to fire a federal employee, you got to give them 60 days notice. So the first 60 days of the shutdown don't really mean anything other than we're not spending money, which in and of itself is a great thing. But on day 61, all those federal employees they want to fire, they've already had their 60 days notice. On day 61, they're all permanently fired. They're not going to come back after day 61 with their back pay and everything else. Not going to happen. They will be fired. And that will mean British agents that work. I'm thinking specifically about, imagine the lists that Tulsi Gabbard has amassed over at DNI, over all the intelligence agents and all of those guys, the MI6 assets, the Mossad assets, the fucking CCP assets, the FSB assets, Russian assets. There's tons of them. There's the Obama holdovers, all of those people, every one of them, right, can be fired summarily by destroying their infrastructure, which is already getting destroyed. Same thing in the IRS, same thing at, I don't know, energy, Department of War, all of it. Tomorrow, gone. Grants, gone. DEI hires, gone. Payments to NGOs, gone. Not discretionary, not important. While they continue to go through the Social Security rolls and find out where all the fraud is, and Medicare fraud. And I remember, I've said, I sat here for a couple of years as the only guy on the planet going, or feeling like the only guy on the planet, that we can cut $2 trillion from the budget. Hell, we spent $2 trillion less in 2019 before COVID than we are right now. Why the fuck we go back to the 2019 budget? Interestingly, I put that, talking point out into the zeitgeist. 4 months later, Rand Paul ran with it. Like, thank you, Senator Paul. One of the few goddamn good things you've done since you've been in office, since you got your ribs broke. Firmly convinced that both he and Thomas Massey are switch hitters, not Democrats. I mean, working for the real bad guys. So, and I wouldn't blame them one bit. Of course, given what's happened to both of them. But I don't have to support them because they utter magic words that sound vaguely libertarian. I'm not that codependent anymore that I need to have somebody to champion up on Capitol Hill. Fuck that. I don't care. They speak magic words. That doesn't make them libertarians. Sorry. Now, so that's on the good side, right? You have the possibility of getting rid of unbelievable levels of the managerial state, which is the problem. The Supreme Court has handed Trump win after win after win after win, reestablishing his Article 2 powers all summer long. Minor cases, all these injunctions, all these roadblocks, all summarily slapped down by John Roberts in the court. Clarence Thomas came out the other day, and a lot of people missed this. Hell, I missed it until somebody pointed it out to me. That I think actually it was Dexter White who pointed it out to me. That Thomas, made it abundantly clear that this session is going to be that judicial review and precedent will not be a guiding factor in our decision-making process on the court. Meaning, just because a previous Supreme Court made an unconstitutional decision in the past does not mean that we have to accept that as precedent and as law. Do you understand the potential of that statement? If he's got 5 or 6 members of the court to agree with him on that point, we could relitigate the entire managerial state all the way back to fucking Marbury versus Madison on the concept of judicial review. We talk about a real reconstruction of the Constitution. And all of a sudden, 90% of the things that you and I have lived under and we've had to accept, and the piles and piles and piles of dog shit that we have been forced to eat our entire lives goes away. Because all of a sudden, we can now read the Constitution and expect the court, we can expect how we know the court is going to act. We've never lived like this, Cedric. We spent our entire lives living under this terrible system, of this terrible bastardization and deformation of our system. And when you go back to things like the overturning of the Chevron doctrine, right, the Chevron deference, right, which was one of the worst decisions ever, because what did it do? It co-opted all three branches of government all at once and handed the power of all three major branches of government and handed it to the managerial state. Congress was empowered to write vague laws with no standards in them, and just say it's up to the executive branch departments to create best practices, and that is law. That they abdicated their responsibility to write law, thereby, and then when they did that, the judiciary, the Supreme Court, empowered the judiciary to block the president from trying to execute his powers because the Chevron deference was in place. Unbelievably bad piece of precedent and legal thinking within the Constitution. Interestingly enough, I was having a conversation with a friend and patron the other night, and he brought up a really great point. It's like, if you look at the strategy to destroy the United States, to destroy the Constitution from within, what they did was, you watched simultaneously over especially the last 20, 25 years, certainly since the beginning of Bush the Lesser's term in 2001, was to have Congress abdicate its powers, and really it goes back to the War Powers Act, abdicate its powers, hand some of the powers that it has, give those to the president. So the War Powers Act, for example, handed the power to declare war, which is explicitly a legislative branch decision. They make the decision, and the commander-in-chief executes on that decision. So Congress has no ability to tell the president that he's prosecuting the war badly, but they can only do that by taking away his power to wage war. But they can't take away his role as commander-in-chief. So the War Powers Act, blatantly unconstitutional. Clearly, the Congress abdicating and handing the president power he shouldn't have, the ability to declare war and then execute war. Should have never had that. But at the same time, we bound the president down by giving his power to the legislature through the judiciary. So it's like everybody's powers were nicely separated and balanced against each other, have all been mishmashed in this spaghetti of bullshit, so that it all looks vaguely parliamentarian, like they have in Europe. What a shock. Because if you read the Constitution carefully, folks, if you think Trump's a dictator now, you ain't seen what the president can actually do. And this is going to be the big shock for so many on the political left. And that's what they're having such a hard time dealing with. And like, Trump's a dictator. And this is all coming straight out of fucking MI6, as far as I'm concerned. Nobody else has the incentive. The Mossad doesn't have this incentive. Are you kidding me? Undermining fucking Trump? He's the Mossad's best goddamn friend. But MI6, is a different story. Because the Mossad and MI6 are not the same. They're downstream of each other. They do a lot of, it's the same thing with the CIA. They all have their agendas. Their Venn diagram does not one-to-one overlap. Right? They have, their Venn diagram of interests. They have some crossover in the middle. When you really think about what the president can and cannot do, and Trump has now been fully briefed on what his Article 2 powers are. He came into office in 2017. He had no idea. Now he knows, and he's executing like he knows. And that is fundamentally different than where we were. And getting control of and changing the definition of a dollar is incredibly important, because what we're now watching is a Treasury Secretary who knows how to manipulate the plumbing of the financial markets to his advantage. And the first thing he did was start draining the LBMA of all of its gold. Now he's draining the LBMA of all of its silver, while he openly empowers Bitcoin to become a collateral asset of the United States. Like, he doesn't understand Gresham's, Exter's pyramid, the inverted pyramid of the monetary system. Hard, pristine collateral assets are all that matter. And Besson, I think, is absolutely trying to grow that pile. And by getting out of the way, if not actively encouraging a higher gold price, so again, something that you and I have been talking about for years, who does that hurt? Everyone who doesn't have gold. Who doesn't have gold? Bank of England, Bank of Canada. Oh, Bank of England, Bank of Canada. Interesting. The LBMA has been running an operation to suppress the price of gold and then blame it on the COMEX. The British do this shit all the time. They operate all these friggin' systems, and then they blame us for it, because it's always our boots on the ground doing doing their handiwork. It's always our banks getting in trouble with doing stupid deals with them or whatever. When globalism was ascendant, our Wall Street was fucking horrible, right? But the minute globalism was then trying to take out our banks were like, whoa, you're not cutting us in on the deal? Now start thinking like mob bosses. This is how I came to the conclusion that Powell was working to break the central banking cartel. Because at some point, he works for the Wall Street. Wall Street was getting cut out of the new global order, with the BIS and the IMF, and the UN being the new global order, rolling all the national governments up into the UN, rolling all of Europe into the EU, and then everybody else up into the UN, and then subordinating the national banks to the BIS and the IMF, and then the high table runs the whole fucking world. I'm like, they didn't deal JP Morgan in. They didn't deal Goldman Sachs in. They're like, you know what? We can roll these fuckers. And they called up Putin, and they called up Xi, and the rest is history. That's my read on the situation. That's my fan fiction. And I've been operating under that rubric now for 4+ years, and I'll put my track record of, calling the shots up against anybody's. I'm not saying that I've been the best at it, but I've been pretty damn good. And I think it's been an operative. I think it's been more descriptive and more operative than, any countervailing thoughts that are out there. I'm watching too many people just run the same script from as if this is 2010. I'm like, this world is not 2010. It's not. And we can have that conversation as well as to why that is. But that's where I am right now.
What do you make of the political violence in the landscape?
I make the political violence is the high table trying to, or Davos, or whatever you want to call them, trying to stir the pot. Like, it's just that simple. Like, when you start to watch what they're doing, it's no different than what they did in Ukraine in the lead up to the Maidan, or what they did with the Muslim Brotherhood across the Arab Spring, or what they're trying to do in Georgia right now, or Moldova, or whatever. It's all the same shit over and over and over again. The British have been running color revolutions against their opposition to their rule for 300 years or more. And when I say the British anymore, I do not mean the English. Right? I'm with my friend Ian Burlingame on this. I understand there's a big difference. It's like Americans are not benefiting from the empire any more than Little Englanders and Scots or Irish or Welsh benefited from the British Empire. Right? or the Dutch people benefited from the Dutch Empire, right? Like, but the British really did perfect the central bank model. Read a great tweet the other day, kind of going over the history of how the old um, East India Trading Company and the Crown Corporation morphed over time into the institutions that we know today as the World Bank, the IMF, the BIS, all that post World War II, in the post Bretton Woods era, and then so that while nominally America was in charge of the world, really the British were still running it from behind the scenes because they had control of the financial system, and they still had control over all of it, through the through the securitization of assets and all the rest of it. And that's where DTCC gets into that, and how none of us hold our stocks and stock certificates anymore. We hold everything in street name, blah, blah, blah. All of that. I mean, tokenization of stocks began 50 years ago with DTCC and holding everything in street name. So, let me put it this way: I'm a little skeptical, of the whole Robinhood tokenization of stocks trading 24/7 thing. That just screams fucking City of London end run around what's coming. I don't see any reason why we need to trade stocks 24/7, 365. None. Especially when we're trading them during off-peak hours when there's no liquidity and the banks are all closed and the fucking clearinghouses aren't open. It doesn't make any sense unless they're going to go to unless they're going to go to some kind of crypto-based settlement at the same time, and we're going to remove the old clearinghouse network from the process. Well, that's a different story. But we're nowhere near that yet. I don't give a shit what anybody says. I don't care if we're talking about anything that Stellar's built or Ripple or this one or that one. No one's built that network yet. We're nowhere near that. So the fact that Robinhood is trying to push into that space now screams fucking City of London. Hey, we need to bomb the friggin' market so we can set the table for the New York Open or for the London Open or for whatever reason, and we can use and it's a backdoor way to price assets. So no, the thing that needs to happen is for them they're losing control of the gold market. They're losing control of the silver. They've lost control of the silver market. They've lost control of the gold market. Now the big question is, are they going to, when are we going to take away their control of the oil market? But that's the last one that they really control.
DTCC, that's a City of London entity?
By proxy through a variety of people, but yes. It's a scary thing, man. It's all there. I tweeted it out. I tweeted it out yesterday afternoon. It's on my Twitter feed. The history of this stuff might have been this morning, actually, as a matter of fact. But all of that stuff, and then that ties back into 9/11 and why did they pull Building 7 and blah blah blah? Because all the DTCC records were in Building 7. So now what? I don't know. It's just every rabbit hole you go down, you find something else to corroborate what you think you know. My point about all of this, and I may be wrong about some of this stuff. I'm not gonna, what's important is to understand is that who's got the incentive to try and keep the existing system running. The existing system is built on debt, taxes, and slavery. By having you individually be a tokenized asset that can have your wealth extracted from you in order to pay for the interest on a sovereign bond, right? And we have to have property taxes in order to make sure that you can never really own your property, so that you can never really build. There can be no real ability to build wealth that is outside of their control. So that's why Ron DeSantis is the best governor maybe this country's ever had, because he's now looking at getting rid of property taxes. And he's the biggest state that can get it done. He has the money to get it done. He probably has the population to get it done. And if he gets it done, it changes everything, because, that feudal serfdom that is property taxes needs to end. You want to fund the schools? We'll figure out a way of funding the schools that doesn't tax people based on the value of their land. That's just bullshit. Like, we can do that. We can solve that problem. We don't need the one size fits all of property taxes. And for all of the People in the audience who say, well, how are we going to get the money? Like, just because you can't come up with a solution to the problem doesn't mean one, it doesn't exist. And that's the biggest problem you always run into with people, that they can't think of a solution off the top of their head, so therefore it can't work. Well, that's nice. I didn't realize that you were God. I didn't realize you were the smartest person in the world. No, you're most people who make those arguments are IQ 105 midwits who've never really thought through a secondary or tertiary effect on a policy that they've advocated for in their entire life. And then we have to, we're supposed to allow these people to fucking vote? Like, really? Okay. Did I just describe half the population? I
Probably
mean,
more.
the women. Meaning I meant the women. Actually, I'm terrible at this point. I'm like, we should get rid of the 19th Amendment too.
When it comes to Bitcoin, the rules are simple. Run your own node, hold your own keys, and protect your seed phrase. That's where MicroSeed comes in. Unlike bulky backups, MicroSeed is stamped onto a tiny steel washer. Fireproof, waterproof, and so small you can carry it anywhere or hide it in plain sight. Go to microseed.io and use the code MATRIX for a discount on your order.
Well, speaking maybe of the middle class, what's the deal with Fannie and Freddie? And how big are they? And
Good callback, Cedric. I had left that one dangling and I forgot to get back to it. So Fannie and Freddie are the one thing that libertarians really, when they finally realize how important Fannie and Freddie are to the entire lifestyle that most modern libertarians think they live under, they realize that most of what they think they believe is wrong. One of the great inventions of America was the government-sponsored 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. There's just no way of arguing it. And I'm going to explain why, and then you're going to understand why 2008 happened the way it did, and then you're going to understand why we had to have zero-bound interest rates, and why Trump was cock-blocked in his first term from bringing them out of conservatorship. Let's start from the beginning. What is the 30-year government-sponsored mortgage? And I say government-sponsored, not government-subsidized. Government-sponsored mortgage. Well, traditionally, home mortgages were 5 or 10 years long. Maybe 15, but really 5 or 10. Why? Because the bank never wanted to take on that much term risk, because the business cycle is anywhere from 5 to 10 years long and blah, 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 blah. Makes sense. So they have a natural disinclination to want to lend over 30 years. But and now and it's hard for us to understand now, but understand that houses also used to cost about 1 year's salary of an average middle class person. So you're talking about having to take 1 year out of every 5 to buy a house and pay it off, maybe 10, plus interest. So it's actually more like 1.5, or even close to 2, probably 2. So you got to take 2 years, and you got to set everything aside for 2 years in order to buy a house and pay it off. Build no wealth. What's the cash flow on relative to that? You're think about that, right? Think about how much of your disposable income you would have to put down every month, pay out every month in order to pay this mortgage off. Or you have to save up 30% and then only pay 70% of whatever. It's a lot of cash flow, right? Now, traditionally, banks like 363 banking, otherwise known as net interest margin banking, it's otherwise known as the following. You borrow at 3, you lend at 6, and you're on the golf course by 3. That's traditional 363 banking. What I mean by that is you are, and me, we're the depositor in a local bank, and the bank's going to pay us 3% because they're lending out to the small businesses 6%, and they're getting 6% on the note. They're paying half to their depositors. They're keeping half for profit and SG&A costs and everything else to run the bank. And it's a very simple model, and it works brilliantly as long as the term makes sense. 3-year loans, 5-year loans, 2-year car loans, whatever. Brilliant. But 30-year note, because The longer you're tying up the money for, the higher the interest rate should be, the more the risk is. At some point, it's not 363 banking you're engaged in if you're doing 30-year mortgages. It's more like 393 banking or 310-3 banking. So what's the government-sponsored mortgage? How do Fannie and Freddie come into this? Well, as opposed to that 393 banking model, you offer. So let's just throw some numbers out, just to make it you understand the thing. As opposed to, so if it's a 5-year note or if it's a 7-year note, let's just call it a 7-year note, just to like split the difference. And a 7-year note is to pay back any amount of money on a 30-year amortization cost would cost you X per month. If you double tap the note, meaning you pay twice X, you'll pay it off in 7 years. So it's a 30-year mortgage into a 7-year mortgage if you pay twice the payment every month. Okay? Now think about the 30-year mortgage. In order to get that 30-year mortgage, though, you've got to pay a much higher interest rates, and that's at the same interest rate. Now, you're obviously going to pay a higher interest rate at 30 years, so you're going to be paying 2.5. You're never going to pay off a 30 in 7 years. So what does Fannie and Freddie do? What they do is say, look, as opposed to you paying $1,000 a month on your 7-year mortgage, you pay $500 a month on your 30-year mortgage, but you pay us $75 in an insurance premium. We then take the mortgage, make a market in the mortgage and a mortgage-backed security where we pull all these mortgages that are, that people can pay, and then we sell those off, and we sell and we split the difference on the note with between that 393 banking and that 363 banking. That extra premium, we slice that up across and securitize it across the entire investment space. People can buy mortgage-backed securities, invest in them. And insurance companies will love the cash flow that they're paid, that gets paid off from the interest on the note. All of it. The insurance companies, the pension funds, private investors, stockholders in Fannie and Freddie, everybody wins. Fannie and Freddie are an insurance corporation. It's what they are. They take in a big friggin' lump of fees, and they have a pile of capital to handle any shortfalls, i.e. people who can't pay, right? But the probability of people defaulting on the 30-year note, because the cash flow is so low, is minimal. So now all of a sudden you have all these high credit-worthy individuals paying literally just over half or less than half what they would have paid had they asked for the 30-year note originally, because they weren't going to pay $1,000 versus $500. They were going to pay more like $1,400 versus $500, because they're going to be paying a higher interest rate. Because you get the 7-year note at 6%, but you're going to get the 30-year note at 9%. So now all of a sudden there's a lot more wiggle room in here. Okay, so this is the key. And what do you do? And if you're Mr. Middle Class American on a salary, like my dad, who's NYPD, I bought my house as a government. The house I grew up in was a $28,000 up in the burbs, up in upstate New York. My dad commuted back and forth to the city every day, making roughly probably made less than actually what the house was. He paid for the house, because he complained about how much he paid for the house. He was probably making like 21 grand a year when he first bought the house, right? And then, at 3%. And so, now he has two options. And here's the interesting part about it. He was at 3%, but this is how creditworthy America had become by 1968. Now think of it this way, right? If you're a small business, if you're a guy with an entrepreneurial bent, you now have an extra $900 a month to go out and try and start a business with and make more than the 6% you're paying on your and build a business making more than 6% a year. And now all of a sudden your customers are paying off your mortgage. That's the key to middle class wealth. The 30-year fixed rate government sponsored mortgage is the key to building one of the main pillars of how we built wealth in the United States, meaning it had to be destroyed. And it was destroyed in the 2008 financial crisis dig into this stuff and you'll see that fucking Paulson and Obama and Geithner ran a fucking operation to blame Fannie and Freddie, turn them into the bad bank to bail out AIG, and then blame Fannie and Freddie, put them in conservatorship, stole the wealth of the stockholders in Fannie and Freddie, bankrupted them all, handed the banks all a bunch of junior preferred shares that then cratered and left big holes in their balance sheets, and everybody walked away. And then Obama was still collecting all the fucking fees, and all the money that Fannie and Freddie were making got rolled into the general fund of the country and is used to pay for Obamacare. Conservatorship and bankruptcy is never supposed to be permanent, but they set rules up, the capital rules up, and they created the FHFA, who then set the friggin' capital rules that made them impossible for Fannie and Freddie to ever meet. And yet somehow they still wound up almost doing so. I mean, they're at a position now they're almost capable of paying off these exorbitant friggin' numbers that they had put together. So the more I read about this, the more it was obvious that they just stole the wealth of an entire generation. And the goal was to destroy Fannie and Freddie and then play up the fact that the Wall Street banks had done this terrible shit, Alt-A loans, ninja loans, this, that, and everything else. That was all done, subprime loans, that was all done on purpose. And then it was all blamed wrongly on Fannie and Freddie, who were then rolled into conservatorship, forced into bankruptcy, nationalized, and then left to rot. And then we passed Dodd-Frank, which makes it nearly impossible for anybody new coming into the market to buy a house under reasonable terms. 20% down or more, maximum loan to value ratios, 20 to 30, 20, 25, possibly 25% down, depending on your credit rating, all of this shit. And if you're a small business owner, which I have now personally gone through myself in trying to get a cash out remortgage against this house, like I've been running, I spent 2.5 months fighting with the fucking underwriter over at Wells Fargo. Oops, I just named names. I wasn't supposed to do that. But since they finally approved my loan, I don't care. The point being is that they give me the runaround because my taxes aren't filed for 2024. Because they're not due yet. I filed an extension, like every other small business owner in America. But the documentation is I can't use my books and the profit of my business to prove that that I'm creditworthy. It has to be 2 years worth of my current 2 years worth of taxes, knowing full fucking well that, and Elizabeth Warren and Barney Frank and Chris Dodd, they all knew what they were doing. Those rules were given to them by the fucking City of London, the fucking British, and the fucking BIS. Because those are the exact same terms that Canadians get today for a 30-year mortgage. Exactly the same terms. I was talking to a Canadian friend of mine about this the other day. So, yeah, we have a 30-year mortgage. You got to put 20% down. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, it sounds like what we have. And that was never the case. Now, you can go for an FHA loan, but it's much harder to qualify for. Not all banks do it, blah, 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 blah. And it's still Fannie and Freddie are like the entire mortgage market now. It's insane. It's absolutely and utterly obnoxious and insane. And the whole purpose of all of this was to deny the basic capital formation mechanism for the middle class. And then they go to the zero bound, and all the money flows into housing and health insurance and this and that and all those things. That's where 90% of the inflation goes. What? Doing what? Empowering the boomers who then rotate out of the their high-priced houses in the Northeast to lower cost places, pocket the difference, and then look at their kids and go, "Oh, why can't you buy a house?" Deadbeat. That's one. And two, the next generation, they can't get a loan. They don't make enough money. Like you got millennials who came into the workforce in the 1990s. or late 1990s and the aughts, making what? Entry-level job, making what? 20 grand a year? They've worked their asses off. They're now middle management making 45. Minimum wage is now friggin' 30 grand a year. Right? My daughter got a job, first job out of high school, making 32 grand a year as an entry-level job over at UF. Okay? Now, she can afford a starter home with, if she were to get married tomorrow, the two of them together could come up with about, $70,000 a year in income. Income times 3, they could afford a $210,000 house, which, by the way, will get you a shitty house on the north side of Gainesville. Right? Not bad. Not in most markets, though. Like, the millennials are still stuck. They can't make enough money to get income times 3 to buy a decent house at 40 years old, 35 years old. The girls are all childless. The dudes are all making, again, 40 grand a year, 45 grand a year. They think they're successful, but they're not. They're just like working their fucking asses off for nothing. They've all been shut out of the system. It's all done on purpose, Cedric. And Trump wanted to get Fannie and Freddie out of conservatorship in his first term. And he couldn't do so because the Supreme Court barred him from firing Mel Watt, a holdover from the Obama administration, as head of FHFA because he didn't want to leave. And they couldn't fire him for cause because of the way the court was structured at the time. Now, Trump's in power. Pulte's in charge. And Pulte is literally his job, from what I understand, is literally just to shepherd this thing through IPO, get them privatized, get them professionalized, get them cleaned up, move them out into the market, and then they'll move the whole thing under HUD. From what I've heard, that's what I've heard, that they'll wind down the FHFA, wind down the reason for it won't exist anymore. They may even throw in, Ginnie Mae at the same time and just bundle the whole fucking thing up into what Trump wants to call MAGA, the Great American Mortgage Company, with the ticker symbol MAGA, which is hilarious. But, call it GAMC, the Great American Mortgage Company. And he understands it. And this has to be done. And I think that the shutdown is part of that, is to slow that IPO down. They will do anything to slow this down because the minute all of this stuff comes out in the wash, everybody's going to realize just how badly Obama fucked the country. And how much of a traitor this guy is on every level. I got news for you, Barry. Get yourself to a non-extradition treaty country. Because they're coming for him. You want to be black-pilled? I'm not black-pilled. I know Trump's target is Obama. But when you take a shot at the king, it has to be a good one. Just like when they took a shot at Trump, they couldn't miss, and they missed. Now they're going to pay the fucking price. I'm dead serious. And everything I'm watching supports this basic thesis. Trump goes to meet with the King of England. And somebody asked me on Twitter, they said, Tom, why is he going to meet with the enemy? That makes no sense. I'm like, oh, it's because he's probably going to, present the King the terms of surrender. The war's over. We've won. Let's cut a deal. Let's move on. Let's free your people. The King clearly said no. On Wednesday, he goes to meet with the King. On Friday, Trump nukes the H-1B visa program. And I'm sorry, but the flooding of Indians through H-1Bs into the United States and Canada's a different mechanism. Obviously, they don't have H-1B visas, but basic idea, clearly coming directly out of City of London, directly coming from the Crown. That was number one. Then he goes to the UN, declares war on globalism. So, we got Antifa in Portland and Chicago and opposing ICE raids and all the rest of it. This is what's going on, man. This war is like every fucking front, everywhere. It's hilarious to see it playing itself out the way it is. But I think it's absolutely, I think it's real. It's hard for me not to see it this way. But they have to stop. Like, how do you get kids to go for the nihilism that is Marxism? How do you radicalize kids that are out there on the streets today? They're not all paid crisis actors, man. Some of them are true believers, right? How do you get those kids that radicalized? How do you get a Tyler Robinson, even if you don't believe the story that he shot Charlie Kirk? I don't care if you do or you don't. Let's just run with it. Let's just say that it is true that he did it and why he did it. How do you get kids that radicalized? He's going to have no agency in the system. He's going to have no belief that he can ever have any agency in his own life. So, and, in my mind, most of the kids who are quote unquote trans are really just, extreme levels of childhood PTSD for a variety of reasons, be it, bad home life, the general anxiety of living through this period of history. And this is what normally happens. We saw it in Weimar Germany, gender dysphoria and drug use and everything else was crazy during Weimar Germany. It's no different than what we're seeing today. But you drive kids towards that by leaving them with no opportunities for a better life. And they either embrace destructive individualism on the right in the form of checking out of the system and chuckling collapsitarian, a la the libertarians and or the fucking groypers, or you go the other way and you embrace Marxism. Now, a lot more kids have embraced Marxism, obviously, because it's also being taught in the schools. And so, as a rational alternative, which it's not. And so, that's what I see. And how do you break that cycle? How do you stop the de-radicalization of the next generation of kids? Well, obviously, you radically lower the true cost of ownership and the cash flow hit relative to wages of being able to start a home and a family. You give them help. You give them hope. You cut their taxes. You make it easier for them to start businesses. You make it easier for them to get into a home and start a family. They're not sitting there thinking, I'm not going to have enough money to start a family until I'm 40. Well, yeah, with an attitude like that, you might as well just turn out the lights on the whole fucking civilization. Because you can't. Women shouldn't be having their first kid at 40. Hell, my daughter was born. My wife was 36. It was a mistake. We were married 13 years before we even had a kid. It was a mistake. Those memes that run around Twitter every once in a while, you see them if you could tell your younger self any one thing in 3 words or less, what would it be? I'm like, that's easy. Have kids early. Huge mistake. Biggest regret of my life, only having one child. So that's the antipode. That's the antidote for the political violence that we're seeing. All of it. And Fannie and Freddie are a big part of this. They're not the only part, but they're one big piece. Because once the IPO happens, then Trump and Bessent could declare an emergency in housing, rewrite the rules, suspend Dodd-Frank, start cleaning the whole fucking thing up, and start getting this thing moving, which is part of the reason why Trump is so adamant that Powell needs to cut rates. But at the end of the day, Powell couldn't cut rates before Trump had actually gotten some wins on the board. The wins are on the board, right, Kamina? Good girl. My dog is over here next to me. And he's got the wins on the board. Powell started to cut rates. I'll be shocked if he doesn't cut rates by 50 basis points, either at this meeting or the next one. Personally, I think he should cut 50 in both places, at both Halloween and, the Fed. The last one is always right around, the Boston Tea Party, the 6th to 15th, 16th, that kind of thing, middle of the month. Yeah. The Ron Paul money bomb day. It's always hilarious to me that that the last Federal Reserve meeting of the year is right around the same time as the Ron Paul money bomb.
Do you think we're on the right path?
Yeah, I think we're on a better path than we were before, and I don't think a path is going to be perfect, and I don't think it's going to be easy. No plan, survives contact with the enemy or reality. But I do think I do think that, the basic framework for what Trump is trying to do is the right framework. Is he going to get everything right? No. Have you met Donald Trump? No. But demanding that it be perfect, I asked the same question. What do you think? I'm 12? I'm not, I don't believe in good guys and bad guys. I believe in flawed people doing the very best they can under difficult circumstances against very bad people. And, what we have to really do is put aside our own anxiety and our own hurt. And believe me, I'm as cynical and as scarred and pissed off about all this shit as anybody else is. But I'm like, it does no good to just, give up. I mean, what the fuck good is that? You're just seeding the ground to them, and you're seeding the war to them before you've even fired a shot. You even tried. And I'm like, I don't know. I spent too many years in the friggin' dojo, learning how to counterfight. I'm like, no, fuck you. You come at me, I'm gonna give you the beans. And no, I spent too many years in a dojo for the purpose of learning how not to be a victim. I will fight the best I can and the way I can. And if that fight is with ideas, words, and communication, then that's how I'm going to do it. Hell, my eyesight's not good enough that I can't, what am I going to do? But I don't know about you, dude. Did you watch Pete Hegseth's speech the other day? You should. You should also watch Trump's speech at the UN if you haven't watched it. The whole thing. You should watch both of them. If those two things don't make you proud to be a fucking American at this moment in time, nothing will. I'm serious, man. I thought Trump's speech at the UN was the most consequential speech since Putin went to the UN and gave them the "Do you understand what you've done" speech 2 days before he invaded, or he came in and supported Syria. It's monumental. It was literally walked in 55 minutes worth of fuck you people. You are all on the wrong path. You're all committing suicide. And I'm here to tell you that the United States is not going to do it with you. And then Hegseth comes out and, like a guy who, and just said, we are not the Department of Defense anymore. We are the Department of War. We are the instrument of the presidents to go to war. And I hope we never have to do so. But defense has gotten us nowhere. Our job is to go to war, to be warriors and fight and be prepared and in shape to do so. And everybody else, get out. Get out. Go away. Dude, after 30 minutes, that guy had me wanting to join the fucking military. Me. I'd be caught dead in a fucking uniform. I was like, dude, that's an organization I want to be a part of. Purpose built, driven to do its job. I also knew that what he was arguing for was that we're going to do this because we know we have the real fight is at home. And that speech was a call to fucking arms to every freaking American. We have a real damn problem. And that problem is right here at home. And it ain't 10,000 miles away over in China or anywhere else. It's right fucking here. We've been invaded, and it's time to stop it. Now, I'm not apologizing for it anymore. So I said this morning, I'm like, if that makes me a fascist, well, then give me a red, white, and blue swastika. I'm good. I'm done. I don't give a fuck anymore. You're not taking my home from me. I decided to stay. I decided not to be a pussy and leave. And now I'm going to fight however I have to. And that's the way everybody has to be. And it's going to be messy. And it's going to suck. And there may be casualties. There's going to be casualties. And we'll move on. But that's what our enemies are forcing on us. They've decided to go to war. Well, they started this fight. By God, we'll finish it. That's the way it has to be.
I guess my final question, how many Americans do you think are aware of any of this?
A lot more than you think, Cedric. Every fucking middle class dude that jockeys a shovel or or whatnot, or runs fucking Wire or whatever in this country. Every small business owner in this country, I know. Every time I talk to one of them, they find out what I do. I've said this before. Every time they find out what I do for a living, they hear the words coming out of my mouth and what I'm like, oh shit, he knows what's going on, and they just stop me dead cold. They're like, I don't need to know anything else. All I need to know is when can we start shooting them. I'm like, but I'm in Florida, so maybe we're a little biased.
Tom, this has been so dope as always. Always a pleasure. I'll leave it to you for any parting words and let people know they can find you and your work.
Sure, thank you, Cedric. I really appreciate you allowing me to ramble that for an hour and a half on a Sunday night over a, a actually not a bad cigar. As always, you can follow me at TFL1728 on Twitter. You can check out the podcast and or the newsletter announcements over at my blog at tomluongo.me. You can follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/Gold Goats and Guns. We do twice weekly market reports, about 1 hour podcasts of a mix of commentary like this, plus tying it directly to the markets, the strategic markets of the day, gold, silver, Bitcoin, and all the rest of them. And the monthly newsletter where we have a portfolio strategy and unique commentary from both myself and my partner, Dexter White. The last thing I want to leave everybody with, and I've been trying to do this at the end of every one of these that I do, is like all the stuff that I talked about at the high level. My job is to try and make it make sense for you so that you can get back a few minutes of your day and understand that this is what's going on. It's not important for you to have to interface with it in any way. You now get it. Now move on and go find something in your local community or your family or your home or wherever that you have control over and fix it. These fucking people that we're dealing with, all they think about every day, they get up in the morning and all they think about is how can we steal another 5 minutes from you, another 10 minutes from you. They understand that time is the only scarce natural resource that exists in the universe. Everything else is recyclable. But your time, as Cedric, as Tom, as whomever, that's limited. That's precious. And if they can steal it from you, they win. So your job, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to go out and find something in your local community that'll get everybody in your community 1 minute back. Now think about all the minutes that you just created for somebody. I don't care if it's, I don't know what it is. You know, because you know what your community needs. If it's, fixing the communications in your household between you, your wife, and your children, do it. Anything that will lower your stress level, lower your anxiety level, and hopefully listening to me talk about this stuff the way I talk about it helps you get back some of your time so that you can go out and you can go be fucking brilliant, because that's what humanity is. And that's why we do what we do. Right? If you can do that, and we all do that, holy shit, dude, the war's already over.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing as always. I really appreciate your bravery and your honesty and your courage.
Thank you, Cedric. Doing my best, man.
Thank you. Peace.
Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Bitcoin Matrix. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below with any questions or thoughts you may have. We'd love to hear from you. You can support the show by checking out our sponsors and affiliate links in the description. It helps keep bringing you great content while connecting you with awesome products that I believe in. Share this episodes with your friends, family, or anyone curious about Bitcoin. And let's keep growing this community together. Stay curious, keep stacking, and I'll catch you in the next one.